This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest today is an ambassador, an actress, an activist, a poet, a mother, and a friend who just happens to go back, somewhere back into the last century. We've known each other forever. One of the favorite things about this show is that I get to have conversations with people that I know and some people that I don't know, but in the process, we reveal things about their lives. So this is a biographical type show. And today my guest is Ms. Lori Ruth Ingram. How are you today, Lori?
Hi, Vince. How are you today?
I am excellent and happy to have this conversation with you so we can get all the formalities out of the way. We were students at Kent State University way back in the 70s. And we had some amazing experiences as poets then and exposed to Pan-Africanism through the Institute, which became the Department of Pan-African Studies. And we've had a friendship that has lasted over all those years. So again, happy to have this conversation. Many of my guests grew up in Cleveland. Is that the case with you?
Yes, I did grow up in Cleveland.
Okay. Talk about some of the places that you lived and some of the neighborhoods that you might have been a part of as you were growing up.
Well, when I was born, we lived on Benwood, and my mom and dad had a nice little colonial house, and then my brother was born, and we still stayed in there till I was in fifth grade. And when I was in when I was in fourth grade, my grandfather died. And so my grandma had to find a way to live with us. And so we all moved to Shaker. Dad moved my grandma in, and we all lived in Shaker. And I went to Shaker schools from then on. Okay,
so you are another one of those African Americans or Black folk who had the Shaker school experience. Interestingly enough, the last show that I recorded was someone who also had that experience. And I've also interviewed someone who was an integral part of the Shaker system, lives in Shaker Heights now, and is an educator. So there are a lot of layers to that. We're not going to get into it completely, but I'll just ask you briefly, what was your experience in the Shaker school system?
Well, when I first got there, it was pretty rough. We were the second Black household in my elementary school. And so I had been in special major work in the Cleveland school system. And I don't know if anybody remembers the major work courses were, we did Shakespeare, we put on plays, we did a lot of poetry. Everything was, they felt we were highly intelligent. So they gave us instruments to play, and we were learning Latin. And I get to Shaker and they say, well, we know what Cleveland schools are like, and we know that you have had an education that is not up to par. So we're going to make you go back and learn how we teach here. And so they took me out of my math where I was doing division of fractions, and they made me learn math all over again, which I was always bad at it from then on. I kind of feel like I'm dyslexic in math now. And they just, really put down the training that I already had. And so the only thing that they did, I think, that was positive was they made me vice president of the student council. And that gave me a way to have community within the school, my elementary school. And they let me be a crossing guard with the crossing guard. I forget what they called those guardians that had the little flag. But they let me do things like that. And that made me feel like I was more a part of the school system. I was more, I had some camaraderie with friends who asked me 100 questions about what it was like to be a Black person, and and what do you say when you're in fifth grade? How do you explain what it feels like to be Black? Like what can you say? You don't know what to do in that situation. But I was blessed. I was blessed. I had some teachers that really liked me, and that's also where my poetry came into play. I started writing poetry when I was in sixth grade, and my teacher, Miss Disnar, had me writing a lot of poetry to put my feelings on paper. And then I was allowed to read my poetry to the class, which then they felt like, wow, she's really deep. We didn't know she was this deep.
And in the sixth grade, you were that deep.
Yeah, in the sixth grade, I was that deep. Right.
Right. That's interesting, too, because you mentioned when you were in the Cleveland school system, they were actually educating you in the arts and preparing you for what happened to you later in life, because even now you're still involved in the arts, you're still involved in poetry, and you told me before we started this show that you're actually writing a memoir, and so we'll get into what that entails. But it's really interesting how education has changed over the years. And back in the 70s, teachers really had more influence on what students were taught. And now you have these restrictive curricula that really don't allow teachers the latitude to teach things like Black history in classes and deviate from what they're being told that they have to teach. I want to switch gears and move up to your college experience. For whatever reason, you and I ended up spending a lot of time in Oscar Ritchie Hall. Can you talk about what pulled you to that institution within the institution of Kent State?
Well, my good friend of the family was Kenyette Robinson, and she had known me, we knew each other before our name changes and everything like that, and I knew her before she became a Pan-African teacher. And so she said, come to Kent, you're going to love it there. So she and Matabu talked to me about getting involved in the poetry scene there. We spent a whole winter going to New York and Newark and doing some poetry readings around there and in Harlem. And we really enjoyed ourselves so much that I said, okay, I'm gonna uproot everything and go to Kent. You have to remember, I was an emancipated minor, so I could go wherever I wanted to go. I was working at the May Company downtown as a Lori Roberts girl in cosmetics when Kenyette decided that I needed to get some college education. And I had been modeling and kind of made a name for myself downtown Cleveland. So I was, going to have to put all of that aside to go to Kent. So what I did was cut all my hair off so I wouldn't be worried about that. I was a hair model. So I said, cut the hair off and you know, get down to brass tacks with the poetry and change yourself to fit what is a preppy type of thing. Because now you're a college student, you're not an independent. And I was an independent student, but now you have to be in dorms. You're not in your own apartment. You know, you got to get along with this other students, and it's not like you're in the work environment. So my work environment was Pan African Studies. I got a job there as assistant editor of the Kitabu newsletter. And so Kenyette and I worked on the Kitabu, and she was the editor. And I got a chance to meet a lot of the students because I was the assistant editor, and I was doing articles about different things like the frats and the sororities and what's going on at Pan African Studies, and, you know, meeting the teachers and meeting new students. So I was really thrust into the public view by knowing Kenyette Robinson.
Okay. Kenyette is a very dear friend of mine as well. As a matter of fact, I have a photograph of me, Sonny Stitt, renowned saxophonist, and a brother named Bobby Dukes who played keyboards. And that's all I can remember about him. I just remember he played keyboards. But she took that photograph of me, and it's one of my most treasured photographs. And I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship between you and Kenyette and your role as the assistant editor. But I want to rewind a little bit. You said that you were an emancipated minor. Talk about why that happened and what the circumstances were.
Well, my mom was really strict, and I was very progressive. You know, I was a socialist. I wasn't even voting yet, but I had decided that I'm going to be a socialist, and I'm going to pass out the socialist newspaper, and, you know, I'm going to tell 18-year-olds, because we were just getting ready to be able to vote, I'm going to tell 18-year-olds to drop off the map and do things differently than what America is doing now. I was really into women's lib, so I was a feminist. I was burning bras all over the house. My mom was like, "You do not belong here. You're not following our rules. You're not doing what I expect you to do." And so she said, you know, one day she just said, "Paper bag your shit and get out of here." And I did. I paper bagged everything, walked down the street. And I walked down the street to one of my good friend's house and told her mother what my mother had done. Now, you have to remember, her mother and my mother knew each other. So she told her daughter, which is, you know, Tammy is I call her my sister now, but back then it was just amazing. Her mom said Tammy had a baby already, and her mom said, "Lori Root's going to need some company while she's outside. So pack your stuff and pack up the baby, and you go too." And so Tammy and I walked out of that house with a baby in tow and just us. Now, right now, that sounds like it was a horrible thing. But looking back over it, Tammy and I have had a rich life being sisters and raising our children and bringing mom and dad back into our households and watching them, you know, live out their lives and everything. So it was bad then, but it ended up being a blessing. We ended up being the bedrock of our family.
So in essence, your mother emancipated you as opposed to being the other way around.
Yes.
Yes.
My mother signed the papers. Now, Tammy's mom didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Tammy's mom still had some kind of relationship with Tammy, and they got it together way before me and my mom did. But her mother practically raised me as well from that point on. Her mom was just making a point, but my mom was very serious. I was not coming back into that house.
So I have to ask the question, was there ever a point in time when you and your mother were able to reconcile and she was able to see the benefit of the decision that she made for you?
Not really. We never really as close as we could have been. My mother got sick later on in her life, and I moved her in with me. And then her health deteriorated so much I had to put her in a nursing home. I just couldn't handle her being in the house. She started getting violent and things like that, and I had young kids. So, I took care of her and visited her most of the time while she was in the nursing home. But, we never got to be close. We never got to be close after that. She just really did not see me as being a positive thing that she had done in her life.
Well, I'd have to imagine it was because of the divergence of your philosophy and her philosophy, and she probably had a lot of old school values, and here you were, this person who had a certain level of consciousness based on your perception of what was going on. The 60s and the 70s were a time of elevated consciousness, and people were saying things aren't right and we have to do something about it. So there was a traditional political paradigm which your mother was probably entrenched in, and then there was you who, as a student at Kent State University, was exposed to Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, and some of the other revolutionary thought leaders that were in existence at that time. The other thing that I would say is that there were probably some emotional reasons that led to the dysfunction that your mother experienced as illness. And so those were her demons that she had to deal with. But I commend you for taking a certain level of responsibility for her in light of the fact that you did have those differences, but you still had enough compassion and care in your heart to take care of her. So let's move forward and come back to Kent State University. You met some pretty high-level folks, including one Gwendolyn Brooks, and you probably met Maya Angelou as well.
I did.
Yes.
Oh, I had Maya Angelou sign my poetry book. I was so excited. She is phenomenal. Like she says, she's a phenomenal woman.
Mm-hmm. And then, go ahead.
We had so many different people. Sonia Sanchez. I read poetry with her. I met Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, and later on was in a play with Ruby Dee here in Cleveland, but that was many years later. I got to really meet her though at Kent. Ron Karinga and his wife, Dick Gregory, which that was something that was a bedrock in your experience with Dick Gregory, that changed your whole trajectory. Just different people that appreciated my poetry, and my poetry was kind of sexual, erotic in nature. So that kind of made me popular with the kids, with the other students, more so than with the teachers. I became an English major and ended up writing, a lot of things, not just poetry.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Dick Gregory piece, and I have to say this because you're so correct, and I'm just wondering what your recollection of that situation was. What I remember was that I wrote a paper, or I actually wrote a poem The instructor was Dr. Ann Adams Graves, and she
Mm-hmm.
asked us to write a paper on the Black experience or the Black state of mind. And I wrote this poem, and it starts off, "N words is bad with they superfly hair and I don't care all over they face. I ain't out of place. I'm in the black race," says they. "Yeah, I got clothes galore, blood. I'm a super stud. I got 12 big for all the that itches," so they say. And so I did this poem, and that was a turning point in my experience at Kent State University, because after I did that poem in the Kent State University ballroom before Dick Gregory spoke, all of a sudden now I'm getting mad respect all over the campus. So you're absolutely...
Well, that's what it was.
Yeah.
For me too.
Yes. So
we were stars back there, Vince. We were stars.
Yes. Oh, what a beautiful memory. I'm so glad that you resurrected that. So I also have to say, just based on what you said about going to New York and hanging out with Okanta and Kenyette, you know, there's a little jealousy there because you had that rich experience. Okanta took me to a writers' conference in Atlanta, and Sonia Sanchez was there, and June Jordan was there, and you know the superstars of the poetry scene were there. And I think another time we actually ended up at Rutgers University, and I think Amiri Baraka was there. So I wasn't really taking pictures to the extent that I am now, but how I wish I would have been in it like I am now back then, because those were some historical events, you know. So yes. You majored in English. Did you graduate with that degree in English?
No, I didn't graduate. I never got my degree.
Okay.
I was there for 3 years between Kent and Cleveland State University, but no, I never actually received my degree. Okay. And that has to do with the fact that during the time I was going to Cleveland State, I was writing for the Vindicator, which is their school newspaper. I was doing field work and special investigative work for them. And I was also doing my poetry. I was English major with a emphasis on creative writing, and my mental health started failing. All of the things that I had gone through culminated in a nervous breakdown. You know, my husband died when my son was 2 months old. I met him at Kent. And we married in Kent. And then he passed away with cancer. And then my mom got sick. And right after she died, then my stepfather died because he missed my mom. And I was just doing all these funerals. That's all I was doing, was funeral after funeral. And it affected my mental health. I got really sick, and the doctors could not or did not do anything about it. They said I had manic depression going on, which when I was on the pills that they gave me, the lithium, I couldn't write. I couldn't think straight at all. I was always sick to my stomach from the lithium. And eventually I remember going to work and not recognizing any of the people that I was in the lunchroom with. I couldn't recognize any of my fellow people that I worked with. And I got so scared, I went outside. And when I went outside, I forgot how to get home. So I was outside for 2 weeks before I found how to get home. And I lived outside for 2 weeks. And I had no knowledge of where I lived and where my kids were. And I remember I could hear the people on the street talking about me. I thought, this is what I'm hearing, that she's the prettiest little bag lady we have ever seen, you know. But I was, you know, I just wasn't good. I wasn't in a good space.
You know,
so I just dropped out of school.
Yeah, you know, that's really telling, the fact that the medications that you were taking to address your mental health would have such a devastating effect on your mental state. That's just, I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words when I think about it, but you know, I also realize that, you know, what you're describing is a testimony to the ineffectiveness of allopathic medical treatment. I mean, it's appropriate in situations where you have a severe critical injury. You know, sometimes it just takes the doctor's intervention, but there are so many things on the holistic side of things that are related to nutrition and using food as medicine that can actually reverse some of those things. And I'm just saying this because these are things that I discovered while I was in the hospital being treated for a severe case of pneumonia. I did a lot of research, and some of the things that I found out were things like the impact of oxalates on your mental health, the impact that creatine can have in fighting depression and anxiety and all those things. So there are things that are naturally occurring in nature that can actually improve your mental state without the intervention of pharmaceutical substances that, as you stated, affected your creative process. You know, it's funny that an antidepressant could cause you to lose your sex drive. You know,
I was going to say that antidepressant really does make it so that you cannot have a culmination of sexual ecstasy.
Right.
You know, you have to give that up.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
You trade that in.
Yeah. I mean, so many things about that process of allopathic medicine can have devastating impacts on our lives. So it's incumbent upon us to look for other ways to deal with the things that affect us. So thank you so much for sharing that. So you eventually came back to yourself, you know, after those 2 weeks, you figured out where you were living. And then what happened after that?
Well, let me tell you how I figured it out. This is amazing. This is only God could have done. This is a miracle. This dog, this little puppy, which wasn't really a little puppy, it was like a big puppy, but it was a golden retriever, was out there with me. And it found me, and it decided that it was going to stay with me. So I had, like, you know, I was sleeping up under, I went to this church, found this church, and I was sleeping in the churchyard up under like a roof. And so I was in there, and the dog was sleeping there. And we would go out every day and go in people's gardens and I would get like their corn and their tomatoes and stuff like this. And I'd eat whatever. I don't know what the dog was eating. And it's real sketchy now, you know, like I don't have a real great memory of it, but I do remember the fact that I was looking at this bird on this fence, and I put my finger down, and the bird got on my finger. Well, most people say it's because probably by that time I didn't smell like a human being at all. And then so the bird was on me, and the people that were outside were like, "Look, she's playing with the sparrow. She's playing with the sparrow." They didn't say what kind of bird it was, but I knew it was a sparrow. And I was trying to get it to leave me because it was like on my shoulder and on my hair and everything. So I flicked my arm. And when I flicked my arm, it was the Lord speaking to me. And he said, my eye is on this sparrow and I am watching you. And I was like, oh, God sees me. And the sparrow flew away, and I remembered where my house was. And it wasn't that far from where I was, because I was, I worked at Tops. I worked at the grocery store, which was right around the corner from where I lived. And so I just went to where they were. And my son saw me and my daughter, and they were like, Mommy, Mommy. And I was like, hurry up, Alex, and go fix me a bath. And I took a bath, and I was feeling way better. So the friend I had at the time, the male friend I had at the time, he took me to the hospital because I was coughing really bad, and it turned out I had pneumonia. Same way when you had I had pneumonia, so they treated the pneumonia in the hospital, and I was better.
Okay, so you talked about your children, and you expressed to me that you wanted to talk to me about them. So, tell me about your children.
Well, I have a son by Adele. And he's Adele Alexander Ingram III, and he's a painter like his father was. He inherited that visual art talent, and so he does paintings and murals, and he's a musician. He's very creative. He thinks outside the box, and he always has. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, but he's a God-fearing young man, and he's never gotten into any really bad trouble or anything like that. So he's always been creative, though. And then my daughter, she's a singer. I moved to Florida to be with her for 10 years, and we kind of did what she wanted to do with her singing career. She has an EP out here. Her stage name is Ida Weston. Her real name is Katrina Root. And she is just really smart. She's always been really smart. And right now she's a boss for an insurance company, and she does auto insurance and home insurance, and she's got her own store in Akron. So she manages her own store in Akron. So she's doing very well. Most of my kids are doing well, and I'm happy that they are. I have two goddaughters. I have one that I live with now. That's Tiffany, and then I have Johanna, and I help my sister raise those two children. And then we have all of their children and their children's children. So that makes me and Tammy the matriarchs of quite a lot of generations of kids. And I have 5 grandchildren of my own. My daughter has 1 son, and my son has 2 boys and 2 girls. So we got a nice little tribe going.
That's amazing, because of all of the experience that you had that led up to you being this matriarch in your family. You also mentioned to me that you had some issues that revolved around domestic violence with some of your male partners. Can you give me a little more on that?
Yes, it seemed like every time I got a male partner, except for Adele, the one that passed away, that there was issues with them becoming violent with me. And it probably is because if I'm going to blame myself at all, it's because I had mental health issues, and they saw that they could take advantage of those things. And when they could, but I'm still smart. See, I'm not going to go for just anything. And when they saw that I'm not going to go for just anything, then there comes time for the violence. But my stupidity was that I would find someone, I would be afraid of them and try to leave. And then when I couldn't really leave, because, that's the hardest part when you're in domestic violence relationships, is getting out of there. That's the most dangerous time for the woman, is trying to get out of there. And so that could really backfire. A man could kill a woman for trying to leave the situation. And so I ended up finding somebody that was stronger and more lethal than the man that I had to get me out of there. And then now I'm in a relationship with that person. And then again, doing the same thing to get out of that. Now with somebody even more dangerous than him. And so, to the point where, I was really hanging around, had men that were really not on the right side of the law and just not good people at all. And just trying to get out of relationships instead of, I would say, manning up like I should have done, and just, going to some kind of shelter or something like that, and getting away in that manner. I didn't learn that until maybe my third relationship, and that relationship, the person set my hair on fire. Well, I left then and went to a shelter. And it was when I went to the shelter, then they began to teach me about the cycle of violence. And then I began to learn what was making me go back to these kind of situations, and also how to get out of that situation. And, it has created for me trust issues, though, even now. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of men beating down the door to get to me, but the whole point being is that I probably wouldn't know what to do in a situation if it came up to me, because I've been in such bad relationships. I don't know what a good relationship looks like.
With that being said, what advice would you give to women who are dealing with a domestic violence situation to get out of it?
Well, I would say figure out how you can sneak out of there and get you some real help at the Salvation Army or Catholic Charities or some kind of battered women's shelter. People that are professionals that know what the cycle of violence is, and they can help you get out of that situation, get your children out of that situation. Whatever you do, don't stay.
Okay. So with that said, I want to switch gears and talk about you, the ambassador, because I know that you are involved in a few different situations. Thanks to you, I was able to participate in the Borderlight Festival for 2 consecutive years and do a solo performance. I also would like to mention that you are an ambassador for Larchmere Arts, and you're working with me in that platform and assisting me in the mission of Larchmere Arts, which is to bring art to our community and to provide a platform for expression in different realms. I also know that you are ambassador for the city of Cleveland. So talk about your role and your ambassadorship.
Well, I saw this ad that said, "Would you like to be an arts ambassador?" It's just and I thought, why not? I'm be the perfect arts ambassador. I know everybody that's an artist, and I could network with those people. So I applied for the job, and it ended up being for Borderlight. And I spent 2 years with Borderlight, and the festival culminates in July. So I was able to get different people to apply to do their work during the festival. And then I was also able to cultivate an audience for them so that there would be people there to see their work. And then I did that for Borderlight, and I intend to do the very same thing for Larchmere Arts Cultural Festival, which probably, I think it's going to be in July as well. So, but I got the resident ambassadorship for the city of Cleveland, for Destination Cleveland, because they were asking the same thing. Could you be an ambassador? And I said, well, I'm already an ambassador. So now I can maybe show people that don't live in Cleveland how phenomenal Cleveland is and get them involved in community here. So it's basically, for me, it's just networking. Me having someone that doesn't know, let's say person A doesn't know person B. Well, I'm going to introduce them and see what comes out of that relationship that they have after I've introduced them, and then introduce them to someone else, and then, keep it going so that you have this stream of people that are involved in this very same thing. Well, Vince, I started thinking about that, and I said, what if I developed some kind of a network for real that, is tangible, that I could have that happen and it be a business for myself, and also, help artists be able to put on their work and have other artists know what they do and have artists help each other. And so that's what I'm working on now is right now we have the idea, and I came up with the name Poseidon's Anchor, that during a time of turbulence there would be an anchor where a creative could see himself or herself where she wants to do her work, and she wants other artists to know what her work is, and have people pursue her or him in their work. So we're working on it. I'm working on it. I'm hoping to get a grant for it so that there will be monies in case, because see, this is what happens. The artists get sidelined because there's not necessarily enough money that they're making through their art that they can take care of themselves financially. So we have to change that. We have to make it so that the art supports the artist. And the only way to do that is to have more people know about the artist's work. And so, that's what I want to do, is amplify the voice of each artist and have each artist know other artists that can come to their rescue in a time of need.
Well, Lori, you're talking about something that is near and dear to my art, because I think, or near and dear to my heart, and maybe art is at the heart of art, play on words. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really important for us to elevate the role of artists in our society, because the healing that we do is something that the allopathic surgeons and others don't do. Art has an ability to heal. I mean, if you just look at your own testimony, you talk about the cathartic aspect of art and how it was able to liberate you from different situations that you faced. When people come into a room where musicians are on stage and they're playing the music and the vibration of the music affects them in such a positive way, they're able to let go of the stress and the anxiety and enjoy the music, and it promotes a certain sense of healing in that specific situation. Someone can walk into an art gallery and see visual art that again causes them to contemplate, to reflect, to analyze, to think, and to take themselves away from, again, the stresses and the strains that they are dealing with. I see art as perhaps a mechanism to address the idea of racism as a public health crisis. And I think when the politicians in this city fully embrace that idea, I think we will see some significant change in our society. And this is against the backdrop of the elites doing everything that they can to enforce a fear-based reality on us and to keep us in a survival mentality, which really works against our ability to think creatively and analytically. So I really do think that two things, love and art, are the answers to all of the issues that we face. You also are involved in an organization called Neighborhood Connections. Can you talk about what you're doing there and the philanthropic aspect of it?
Yes. Neighborhood Connections is an organization that weaves communities together, shows people how they can be involved in their community in every kind of way. As far as they tackle food insecurity, making sure that people have enough food, and not just like food trucks, but I'm talking about farming, teaching people how to farm. They help people that are thinking outside the box, that want to do make neighborhoods more walkable, and whatever you could think of to engage the people in your community. If you have a good idea, Neighborhood Connections is offering grants to help you be able to implement your idea. So right now I'm on the neighborhood grant committee, where I'm helping being able to decide who's going to get these grants. And then as well, I'm doing some traveling where I'm going to a retreat that's going to teach me how to better help the people in the community around me. So, Neighborhood Connections is a very good tool to use if you're a creative, because they can get you involved with things that are going on in your community that you wouldn't necessarily know about if you weren't with Neighborhood Connections.
Yes. So I will add to what you're talking about in terms of Neighborhood Connections, the Assembly for the Arts, because the Assembly is an advocate organization for artists in our community, as well as the nonprofit arts organizations, the larger ones like the Cleveland Museum of Art and the Cleveland Symphony and the Museum of Contemporary Art, and one other major institution that escapes my mind right now, but also 300 smaller nonprofit arts organizations. And I know about two respective grant programs that the Assembly offers. One is the Boost Fund, which is going to have an enrollment that starts on October 22nd, I believe, and extends through the month of November. $1,500 grants that are awarded on a lottery basis. And then the Creative Impact Fund, which is being adjudicated right now, and shortly we'll be announcing the recipients of those grants. 30 grants $5,000, 15 of them, and then $10,000 grants will go to artists that are further along in their careers. So these are two grant programs that come through the Assembly, but I am also looking to make the Assembly the go-to place to identify other grant opportunities for artists. So this is some of the work that's being done behind the scenes to create more opportunity for grant programs to be passed out to artists in our community. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea with what you're doing with Neighborhood Connections. And I know that several neighborhoods have been affected in a positive way by some of the projects that everyday people come up with. So
yes,
thanks to you, and others who are involved in that organization, folks are getting dollars. And this is against the backdrop of reductions in funding for the arts. The present administration has not really been kind to folks who are out there doing big things in their community with grant dollars. So we have to look at other ways to get funding to do what needs to be done. That really is the answer, empowering artists to do what they do. I also would like to give a shout out to the Transformative Art Fund. It was a situation where we got $3 million and we were able to fund 7 different projects, each with a budget nearly $500,000. And these projects have definitely had a transformative impact on the city of Cleveland. But the problem with it is that it was federal dollars that came out as a result of the pandemic. And so one of the things that I'm advocating is that the city of Cleveland have a budget for art within its budget, because right now there is none. There are things that happen in terms of art projects that city council members facilitate. So you might see a mural go up here or there, but art is more than just murals. And I think when the city takes this seriously and they start funding the arts, from what I'm told, there's a 7-fold return of investment for every dollar spent in the arts. And even after the pandemic, arts were able to contribute $500 million to the local economy. So light bulb, come on, folks. Let's do what's right. We have just a few more moments left in the program. Can you talk about your memoir and what you're doing in terms of moving that along?
Well, I have started working with Literary Cleveland here, and taking courses in at Lit Cleveland as a nonfiction writers courses, and that's helping me to be able to write my memoir. And it's been an integral part of, what even made me think I could do this is taking courses with Lit Cleveland. And as I began to write my memoirs, I'm focusing on my mental health journey and what happened to me as far as, having my nervous breakdown, how long that took for me to get it together, what kind of doctors helped me, and what kind of medicine that I'm on currently. And because I've been on this medicine, since then, and I can really think straight now once they found the right and correct medicine. So, I want people to see that they can go through something and they can come out of it on the other side being a whole and fruitful individual. And I find myself being a whole and fruitful now. And I just wanted to tell people about that journey in case someone else is going through it and seeing thinking it's the end. It's not necessarily the end.
All right. Well, Lori, I want to thank you for being my guest on Open Door, and we will make sure that folks have a way to get to that when it is done. I'll help you publicize that. I'd also like to mention that you can check out this podcast on my YouTube channel. So go to Vince Robinson on YouTube and check out Open Door. As always.
Thank you, Vince.
All right. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make it a great day. Peace.
Bye-bye.